Hey, Mike James again, back with you with Hive Time. Today is episode 5. I do not have a guest with me today, but just wanted to make a quick little video recording for you, those of you that are listening to it as a podcast. I'm going to be displaying a couple things today, and what we're going to cover is hive inspections. And so I'm going to try to make it a bit listener friendly. But if you'd like to, you certainly could hop on our YouTube channel if you're not on it already. And if you are on it right now, click, which side am I on? That side. There's a subscribe button down there. If you could hit that subscribe button, that would be great. It helps the algorithm decipher which shows are starting to grow, and being that we're brand new, really helps the growth of the podcast. And so I would really appreciate it if you did. And so let's jump right into this. Today, I've got a resource-based podcast. It's if you want to download the Hive inspection sheet that I'm kind of going to be running through today, and kind of the steps that take place going through a hive inspection, no matter what time of year it is. I mean, it's springtime, northern climates. We really aren't doing a ton of inspecting other than kind of our casualties of winter in dead outs and discovering which of our hives are strong and weak or non-existent due to the winter. But coming here in a month or so, we're going to really start diving into the hives. And if you haven't done it before, or you're not really that experienced, having a guide is really great. It helps to have a mentor that can point out a few things here and there and decipher what you're looking at. But Google or YouTube is also a great resource. There's lots of information out there on the web. So if you just spend a little bit of time poking around the web, you should be able to find it. Whether that's from my resources or not, there is a lot of good information out there. So what I'm going to do is the place for the inspection sheet. It's free. I actually just made it yesterday. I kind of had one going, but I made it a little prettier. But it's going to be a free download. It's 2-page. I was going to try to make it 1-page, but I just couldn't squeeze it into 1-page. So it's a 2-page document. And you could go to www.hyperhive.com, and that is spelt hyper, Hyper, Hyve.com, and then just /free download. It'll bring you to the page. Gives you a little kind of teaser of an image. And then the snow is just falling off our roof. So I'm in the upper Midwest, and it snowed last. I don't know if you could see in the window behind me or not. But it's been snowing the last couple of days. It's been interesting. But the sun just came out, and all the snow is now just melting off the roof. Sounds like someone's banging on the window. So just go to the free download page. So once again, hyperhive.com /free download. A little teaser image here. But then all we're asking for is first name, last name, and an email. And you don't have to really put your first name, last name, but it kind of helps us in knowing who downloaded it, and so we can share relative information to you in the future. But I'm just going to put mine down. Enter it in, agree to the terms, and then a click here to download will show up. You just click on that, and you'll be able to download the report. So what we're going to cover today, like I said already, is what you're looking for in a hive inspection. And so I'm not necessarily a beekeeping expert, but I've been doing it a long time. I've run a business managing beehives. And so I've kind of got my way of doing things. You may have yours, but there are, for the most part, some good practices. And what I have found is for hives that you don't document throughout the year, and especially if you've got more than, 2 or 3 hives, it can start to become a bit overwhelming in regards to what happened throughout the season. And so you might feel that you got a good handle on the springtime, but come the end of the season when one's crashing and you can't quite remember, well, was this the one that had a bunch of swarm cells in it? And what is that? It's good to have some record keeping. And in today's day of age where we're having lots of colony collapse problems, and it's my personal opinion, and which is backed off of some studies and some conversations, is that if we can keep those bees managing themselves for the most part, that's good for everyone. Because if we've got varroa-sensitive hygienes in most of the colonies, that means that those colonies are sending out drones that also potentially have those characteristics, and they are breeding with the new queens that, whether you're breeding queens, letting them swarm on their own if that's the case, or maybe accidentally for that matter, then that virgin queen can fly out and potentially mate with local stock that have those qualities. But if we are not keeping track of which hives appear to be starting to lean towards self-management, then we're really guessing. And so, in beekeeping, you don't really want to be guessing, especially as a beekeeper. I mean, it's our job to kind of manage them. And, obviously there's some qualities that we're after, right? Like we want them gentle. We want them to be honey producers. And ideally, we'd love for them to be able to manage varroa and other pests by themselves, or mostly by themselves. And so what I did was I created a bit of a scoring system, which, as I was putting this together, I realized that you could almost have your completely separate scoring system. And that, I think, leans more towards people that are trying to breed bees and have their own local hygienic hardy stock, all the buzzwords, right? And so, but I also think that it's important to score your hive as the season goes, rather than just go, oh, there's swarm cells. Oh, these ones are kind of nasty today. It might be that it's, weather's just crappy, right? They just got attacked from another hive, and so they're crabby. Whether or not they actually get crabby, I don't know that to be true, but it seems to work in my head. And so when you're going through the hive, the first thing I like to do is just kind of get a general idea of their temperament. And so one of the things on this hive inspection sheet is you have the ability to select kind of where they are on the chart in regards to being aggressive to, perfectly calm. You can handle them without gloves on. I typically wear gloves all the time, just because I'm normally working through the hives quickly. And so, but I guess that's for a whole different episode in regards to safety gear and blah, blah, blah. But, yeah, so temperament is the first thing I look for. Their laying pattern is also something that beekeepers are paying attention to, whether they're sporadic. And by sporadic, I mean, you've opened them up. There appears to be no sign of foul brood, where foul brood can potentially provide some sporadic look to it. And we'll get into that here in a little bit. But, we've had queens where they kind of lay on this one frame a little bit. They kind of lay on this one frame a little bit. And I'm sure you've seen on the Instagram where, people are holding up these beautiful frames with all capped brood in them. And, it's about the size of a soccer ball, it looks like. And there's maybe just a couple missing within there. But, that's what I'm describing. It's like a tight laying pattern. And the way I like to think of it in the nest is, if you've got, whether you run 1 box, 2 box of brood, I personally just run 1 box. I'm considering maybe going with a medium on top, but I'm still kind of messing around with kind of what my system is. But I like to think of it as you've got like a nuclei or nucleus within that hive, and they are working. The center of that ball is the brood nest, and then just outside of that, you've got your pollen and your bee bread, and then outside of that is your honey, and so it should really start to lay like a cycle to where the queens. Well, I shouldn't say that must, right? These are wild animals. This is what beekeepers tend to be after: is the queen is laying a tight little circle to start, and she works her way out. And as the bees emerge, it's a reverse pattern. Like it tends to kind of be like a donut, and it just kind of keeps working like that throughout the season in 21-day cycles for the worker cells. And so you pull out the frames, take a look, see if it's sporadic, moderate, tight, and you'd have the ability to check these things off on your inspection sheet. And so the next thing is queen presence. Depending on your style, I don't like looking for the queen every time. I'm not very good at it unless she's marked. Sometimes, actually, I shouldn't say I'm not really good. It goes day by day. There are days where I can go through my hive and I find her almost immediately in every single hive. And then there's days where I got to go through the frames 3 times because I'm like, well, there's eggs in here, but I don't see her anywhere. So I just, at this point, have just gone, okay, what's in there? Are there all 3 levels of the brood in there, if you will? Is there egg, larva, and cap cells? If that is there, she's there. I mean, if there's eggs in there, she's been in there within the last 2 or 3 days. And so I will gauge her presence purely off of eggs. And so in that situation, you can total up your score, or your initial score, which will give you an idea of what is this bee or this queen capable of. And in this point in time, you're scoring her. And I like to mark all the boxes and say this is an A, a B, or a C, or an F for that matter, A, B, F. And in my case, I've got 2 kind of operations within one being breeding queens, and then the other is just kind of my general honey production. And then I've got my hobby, which I've got a few here at the house, but and in that case, those ones almost always get neglected, sadly. But so next step is mite testing. We recommend doing mite tests not every single time, but often enough. I would say in cold climates, starting in probably mid-May is a good idea to start testing it, getting an idea of where they're at. And so there's different types of tests that you can do. Traditionally, there's the alcohol wash, powdered sugar roll, or sticky boards. And you could grade them on this inspection sheet based off of that. And then once you're done, you can take those 2 sections, add them up. Once again, you get a good idea of where that queen or colony is sitting. And in that case, you could start scoring them, and you keep track of which ones are doing good. And in my case, I like to, the ones that aren't really performing like I would like them to, we end up culling them off or requeening them, because it does nobody any good to have poor genes within bee yards, because you're just ultimately diluting the higher quality ones. And so I think as beekeepers, we're responsible for that. But moving on, outside of scoring, which is kind of really the serious aspect of it, everything else tends, other than treatments, tends to be more observation based, which could give you clues on why or how did the bees do good or did they do bad. And over time you'll start to get a bit of a pattern. And so one of the things that we're working on, and I really kind of almost get a bad taste in my mouth when I even consider mentioning the Hyper Hive product, just because I don't want this podcast to be about that. But One of the things that we're looking at doing is to help simplify some of those things. And so through data integration within the Hive itself, a lot of this stuff will start to be self-tracked on a minute-by-minute basis, which will give you the ability if a hive were to crash, and with outside of like a physical observation, right? Like you can't, at least at this point, maybe sometime in the future, we don't have the capability of going, oh, there's drone cells, or I'm sorry, there's queen cells on the frame and they're in the middle or the bottom. You know, you need to observe that, at least for now. But it'll give you some metrics, some high quality metrics on potentially how the hive is doing. And that's where our AI comes in, or machine learning, that it will be able to track those patterns within other hives, this hive, your hive, and start to go, oh, well, we've seen this before, and this is what normally happens with X amount of certainty. So it gives you a proactive approach to managing your hive without actually potentially having to even go in it to discover that. So in this case, these are physical observations, and this inspection sheet is based for hives of any kind. It's a bit written Langstrothy. I'm not a top bar guy. I don't really understand all aspects of them. I get the idea. And so there's a lot of things that likely could cross-pollinate, if you will, with this inspection sheet and other types of hives. But it was the Langstroth that was in mind when we designed this, and we were going through those tasks. But yeah, so through the observations, queen located, you can physically look for, reminds you if she's marked, not marked, and then what color, number. Most people just mark them with color pens. Typically, you're not seeing people numbering bees or queens unless there's a breeder program. So, excuse me. So, that this is helpful. For instance, sometimes I've got half of my queens marked, and the other ones we just hadn't had time to get to them. And so you go to one, and you're like, "Gosh, I think this one was marked, but I don't see her." Or here's one in here that wasn't marked. Well, you go back to your sheet and go, well, there was one marked, so she's gone, and this is a new virgin queen, or just a new mated queen. And then queen cells present, that I would say is midsummer. One of the highest priorities, at least in my mind, when I go into hives, is are the hives getting ready to swarm? In our case, I like carnelians, and so the window of them presenting to you that they are going to be leaving you soon is short, and so I'm a little hypersensitive, I guess, to that. But typically, bottom frame cells are signs of swarms. Like they've thought it out, they're building them on the bottom. Converted worker cell would be the little peanut cell, the queen cell coming off the middle of your frame. Typically, those are more emergency cell based, which means that there's something wrong with the queen, or the queen has just gone. Or potentially, there's lots of, I guess, potentials, but those are typical signs of what the hive's thinking. So, and then you got hive population. Hive population can be critical in pollination contract situations, but it's also good metrics to figure out how strong is this colony in regards to knowing when to ramp up. And so whether you're using a 10 frame or an 8 frame, you may want to adjust the numbers a little bit, whether it's an 8 frame, but gives you an idea of kind of how strong that hive is at that point in time. And obviously coming in early spring, that population is going to be super great. But I would say come June, middle of the day, in the morning, you're going to want to open up those boxes and see a lot of bees in there, because they're ramping up for nectar flow. So, and then hive condition, this is just kind of general observation. Are they building burr comb? What's kind of the scent do you get? Do you get a foul odor? If you do, that's likely a potential problem with some disease like EFB or AFB. Primarily, I think AFB. I think EFB I don't have much experience with EFB, but If I remember correctly, that has a foul odor as well. And then kind of go through your equipment. Do you have equipment that's going to need to be replaced? I think maybe a good habit to get into is to write dates on your frames, which kind of gives you an idea of how long you want to have it. I don't know the optimum amount of seasons to keep equipment in a hive, but I have heard people say 5, 6, 7 years is about a good time to start replacing your frames. I primarily just use a visual check. And if it looks old or mice have chewed on it from a dead out in wintertime, then I'll consider marking them for damaged. And you can make a note and say, okay, well, next time I need to bring out 3 frames for this hive. And so, like I say, it's a great record keeping. And so you could, let's say second, third time you're going to go inspect a hive, you could just simply go back in your 3-ring binder, or however you choose to keep these, and go, okay, well, what was it doing, and what did I tell myself I needed to do in this hive? So I got a couple spots here to just make some notes as well. Your hive equipment, this primarily you want to potentially keep track of what you have on each one. Same thing, whether you need to bring some out or take them off in your next inspection. And so on the second page, there is a pest management section, which is also pest and disease. And it gives you a spot to select potential issues within the hive themselves, whether they're diagnosed or you suspect. But there's also a spot for you to write down the mite count per 100 bees. And so gives you an idea, once again, of what exactly is going on in the hive, how you plan on performing pest management, whether you're using more of a natural technique, if you will, or if you are going to go after it from a chemical standpoint. And so the next topic would be, next topic. The next section would be, your treatments and what you are doing and the date that you start them. So it gives you the ability to put your start date, and then some of the popular treatments, which would be splits, Apiguard, Hopguard, oxalic acid, terramycin, Epistan, Thailand, blah, 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 blah. The list goes on and on. So I won't get into what all of those are used for, but it gives you kind of a list to start to, if you're not familiar with treatments, you could just research online what those are, and they'll show you how you can access them. Some of them are just buy over the counter. Some of them you've got to get from a veterinarian. And then always follow the labels on them. It's federal law to follow those labels. And so if you're using it any other way than with how the label describes, you're breaking the law. So I'm not here to bring the iron fist, but it is important to follow the label. And then gives you a spot here to also show when you removed them. So likely if you're filling this out and you're adding, let's say, Hopguard, you'd put your start date, check your Hopguard, and then on your next one, you'd have nothing in your start date, and you would have now your date removed, and you could go back and go, okay, well, we hit that time window that was required on that label. And then there are hive tasks, which is pretty much our second job, right? First job is observing. Second job really is our tasks within the hive. And so it's broken up into typical spring, summer / honey flow, and fall, winter segments. And it's good to keep track of what you've done on them, and it may be helpful to put together a management plan, how you plan on managing your hives prior to, which will give you some guidance on which tasks you're going to be performing on each segment of the season. So And then there is a Hive, just plain old Hive configuration. How do you have your Hive configured? Are you using one brood box, two brood boxes, maybe even three? And how big are those boxes, as well as how many supers do you have on? Are you using vented covers, screen bottom boards, so on and so forth? And or do you have specialty equipment on there? Are you trapping for pollen? Are you collecting for propolis? So, so those are the tasks that I like to run through when I'm doing a hive inspection, and hopefully this is helpful. I truly believe the inspection form that we created is helpful. And so I encourage you to go download it. Once again, it's hyperhive.com/free download. And Hyperhive is spelled HYPERHYVE.com /free download. So thanks again for joining me. I've got a couple guests lined up for the next couple shows, which I'm really excited about. I'm not going to tell you who they are yet. It'll be good. So as always, please subscribe, hit that like button, leave us a review, let us know how we're doing or how I'm doing, and we will see you on the next episode. Thanks. Take care.